Time has a way of accusing us. It whispers reminders of chances missed, years lost, prayers unanswered, and seasons that slipped through our fingers. It reminds us of relationships that ended too soon, dreams that stall, mistakes that cost us more than we imagined. Many people don't just feel pain in the present, they grieve the past. They live with the heavy question, what if I hadn't wasted those years? Yet here's the truth that changes everything. God is not limited by time, and he is not intimidated by your past. What you call wasted, God calls redeemable. What you mourn, God sees as raw material for restoration. And what feels like delay to you may be preparation in the hands of God. There are moments in life when you look back and feel behind in purpose, behind in faith, behind in calling, behind in progress. You may feel like others are miles ahead while you're still trying to recover from the damage of old decisions, but God never measures your life the way people do. Heaven does not operate on human calendars. God does not rush, and he does not lose time. He restores. God is not limited by time, and understanding this truth changes how you see your past, your present, and your future. Human beings live by clocks and calendars. We measure life in years, deadlines, ages, and seasons. Because of this, when something doesn't happen on time, we label it as lost. We say we are too late, too old, too far behind, or that we missed our moment. Time becomes an enemy that constantly reminds us of what could have been. But God does not experience time the way we do. He is eternal. He stands outside of time, seeing the beginning and the end at once. What feels delayed to you has never been delayed to him. When you believe God is limited by time, you begin to panic. You rush decisions, settle for less, and live with regret. You feel pressure to catch up, to prove something, or to recreate moments that have already passed. This pressure slowly drains faith. But when you understand that God is not bound by time, peace replaces anxiety. You realize that your life is not falling apart just because it didn't unfold the way you expected. God's purposes are not threatened by your delays, your mistakes, or your slow progress. He is not scrambling to fix what went wrong. He is calmly working all things together with perfect awareness. The idea that God can restore years seems impossible to the human mind. We think in terms of minutes and hours, so we assume once time is gone, it is gone forever. But restoration is not about getting the same time back. It is about God bringing fulfillment, meaning, and fruit that outweighs what was lost. He can do in one season what seems impossible in a lifetime. He can cause growth to happen quickly, healing to happen deeply, and purpose to emerge suddenly. What feels like years of standing still can be followed by a season of rapid movement when God steps in. Many people carry shame because they believe they wasted too much time. They replay old decisions, old relationships, old habits, and old sins. They imagine where they would be if they had chosen differently. But this mindset keeps them trapped. It assumes God stopped working when they failed. It assumes his grace had an expiration date. The truth is, God already knew every wrong turn before you took it. He did not call you based on a perfect timeline, but based on his perfect plan. Your delays did not surprise him. Your failures did not weaken his ability to restore you. God's power over time means that no season of your life is meaningless. Even years that felt empty or painful were not wasted in his hands. Those years shaped your character, taught you endurance, and deepened your understanding of grace. They gave you compassion for others and wisdom you could not have gained any other way. When God restores, he uses what you learned in those years to accelerate you forward. You don't start from zero. You move forward carrying insight, strength, and maturity that only time and struggle can produce. Understanding that God is not limited by time also frees you from comparison. When you think life is a race, you panic when others seem ahead. You measure your progress against theirs and feel behind. But God never asked you to live by someone else's timeline. He wrote your story with intention. Some people bloom early, others bloom later, but with deeper roots. Timing in God's kingdom is not about speed, it is about readiness. When God releases blessings too early, they can destroy rather than help. Delays are often protection, not punishment. There is also hope in knowing that God can redeem even the consequences of wrong choices. While choices have real effects, they do not cancel God's ability to bring good out of them. He can take broken paths and turn them into testimonies. He can use your past to position you for a future that could not exist without it. Time does not weaken his mercy. Years do not exhaust his patience. His grace does not run out because you took too long to get it right. Living with the awareness that God is not limited by time changes how you approach today. You stop obsessing over what you lost and start focusing on what you can surrender now. You realize that obedience today is more powerful than regret over yesterday. You understand that God can work with what you give him, no matter how late it seems. Faith becomes less about fear of running out of time and more about trust in God's timing. When you fully embrace this truth, hope is restored. You begin to believe again. You stop saying it's too late and start saying God is still working. You wake up with expectation instead of regret. You trust that your best days are not behind you simply because time has passed. In God's hands, time is not an obstacle. It is a tool. And when he chooses to restore, no amount of lost years can stop him from fulfilling his purpose in your life. Restoration is greater than replacement. And this truth reshapes how we understand loss, healing, and God's work in our lives. Replacement suggests getting back what was taken, returning to the same place, the same condition, the same version of life as before. But God does not work by simply restoring things to their former state. He works by transforming what was broken into something stronger, deeper, and more meaningful. When God restores, he does not aim for what was. He creates what could not have existed without the loss. Many people pray for replacement. They ask God to give them back the years, the relationships, the opportunities, or the innocence they lost. But God sees beyond our limited vision. He understands that some things cannot be returned in the same form because we are no longer the same people. Loss changes us. Pain matures us. Experience reshapes our hearts. God's restoration honors that growth. Instead of rewinding life, he redeems it. He uses the broken pieces to build something new, something richer than before. Replacement focuses on recovery, but restoration focuses on purpose. God is not only interested in healing your wounds, he is interested in what those wounds will produce. He does not just remove the pain, he gives the pain meaning. What hurts you becomes what shapes you. What broke you becomes what strengthens you. What nearly destroyed you becomes the source of wisdom, compassio, and an authority in your life. This is why restored lives often carry deeper depth than untouched ones. They understand grace, humility, and resilience in ways that cannot be learned without struggle. Many people struggle to accept restoration because they are attached to what they lost. They remember how things used to be and measure everything against that memory. This keeps them stuck in disappointment. But God cannot restore what you are trying to recreate. Restoration requires letting go of the old picture so God can paint a new one. Holding on to replacement limits what God wants to do. Surrender opens the door to transformation. God's restoration often produces more fruit than the original season ever could. A healed heart loves more deeply than one that has never been broken. A restored faith trusts more sincerely than one that has never been tested. A redeemed life carries more influence than one that never fell. Value is not in pretending the pain never happened, but in allowing God to turn it into something that blesses others. Restoration multiplies impact. When God restores, he also restores identity. Loss has a way of redefining people in negative ways. They begin to see themselves as failures, victims, or people who missed their chance. God breaks those false identities. He reminds you that you are not defined by what you lost, but by who he created you to be. Restoration rebuilds confidence from the inside out. It heals the way you see yourself, not just the way others see you. Another powerful aspect of restoration is that it often leads you into a better future than the one you imagined before the loss. Some doors close because they were too small for who you were becoming. Some seasons end because they could not sustain the growth God planned. In hindsight, what felt like devastation becomes redirection. God's restoration does not trap you in nostalgia. It propels you forward into purpose. Restoration also changes how you value things. Before loss, people often chase success, approval, or comfort. After restoration, priorities shift. Faith becomes more sincere. Relationships become more meaningful. Purpose becomes more important than position. God uses restoration to refine your heart. aligning it with what truly matters. You no longer want the old version of life back because you see how limited it was. It is important to understand that restoration does not deny the reality of pain. God does not minimize your loss or dismiss your suffering. He meets you in it. He allows you to grieve. He honors your tears, but he does not leave you there. He walks with you through the process of healing and then leads you into renewal. Restoration is not instant. It is intentional. It unfolds as you trust God step by step. Ultimately, restoration being greater than replacement reveals the heart of God. He is not a God who merely fixes broken things. He is a God who creates beauty from ashes. He turns mourning into meaning and setbacks into setups for purpose. When God restores, you don't just recover what was lost. You become someone stronger, wiser, and more grounded than you were before. And one day you realize that what you thought you needed back was never as powerful as what God gave you instead. Your past does not disqualify you, and this truth is one of the most difficult for people to fully accept. Many live with the silent belief that if they had failed less, sinned less, or chosen better, God would be able to use them more. They assume their mistakes lowered their value or pushed them outside the boundaries of God's plan. This belief slowly drains hope and replaces faith with self-condemnation. But God has never operated on the basis of human perfection. He has always worked through flawed people, broken stories, and imperfect timelines. Disqualification is a human concept, not a divine one. People disqualify others based on records, reputation, and past behavior. God looks at the heart, the potential, and the willingness to surrender. When God calls someone, he does so with full knowledge of their weaknesses. Nothing about your past shocked him or caught him unprepared. He did not discover your flaws after he chose you. He chose you knowing them. This means your failures are not interruptions to God's plan. They are already accounted for within it. Many people confuse conviction with condemnation. Conviction draws you toward change and repentance, while condemnation pushes you into shame and hiding. God convicts, but he never condemns. Shame tells you that you are unworthy to move forward. Grace tells you that you are forgiven and invited to begin again. When you live under condemnation, you avoid purpose because you feel unfit for it. When you live under grace, you step forward humbly, knowing that your strength comes from God, not from your past performance. Your past can only disqualify you if you allow it to define you. God defines people by who they are becoming, not by what they have done. He sees the finished work even while you are still in process. That is why he often calls people before they are ready. He knows that growth happens through obedience, not before it. If God waited for perfection, no one would ever be used. Some of the most powerful testimonies come from the deepest failures. People who have walked through addiction, broken relationships, poor choices, and spiritual distance often carry a depth of compassion and authenticity that untouched lives cannot replicate. God does not erase their past. He redeems it. What once brought shame becomes a source of healing for others. Their story becomes evidence of God's mercy rather than proof of weakness. There is also a false belief that time itself disqualifies people. Many think they are too old, too late, or too far gone to start again. But God is not bound by age or seasons. He can ignite purpose at any moment. The idea that you missed your chance assumes that God only gives one opportunity. Scripture and life both prove otherwise. God is a God of new beginnings. He opens doors no one expects and revives dreams people assumed were dead. Another reason people feel disqualified is because they compare their brokenness to someone else's success. They assume God prefers others because they appear more consistent, gifted, or disciplined. But God does not rank people the way humans do. He looks for availability, humility, and obedience. He can do more through a surrendered heart than through a flawless image. In fact, weakness often becomes the very place where God's strength is revealed most clearly. Accepting that your past does not disqualify you requires humility. It means admitting you need grace. It means letting go of self-punishment and trusting God's forgiveness. Many people say they believe God forgives, yet they continue to punish themselves. They replay old failures as a form of control, thinking that constant regret proves remorse. But God does not ask for self-torture. He asks for repentance and trust. Once he forgives, he invites you to move forward freely. Your past also gives you perspective. It teaches you what does not work, what truly matters, and how fragile life can be. God uses that perspective to guide your future decisions. Instead of being a liability, your past becomes an asset when placed in his hands. It keeps you grounded, dependent on God, and sensitive to other struggles. When you finally accept that your past does not disqualify you, fear begins to loosen its grip. You stop hiding. You stop waiting until you feel worth. Why? You step into obedience even while feeling imperfect. And that is where transformation happens. God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He shapes people as they walk with him, not before. In the end, your past is not the final chapter of your story. It is a background that highlights the power of God's grace. What disqualifies people in the eyes of the world often becomes the very reason their lives point so clearly to God. And when you allow him to use your story, you discover that nothing you have done is stronger than what God can do through you. Wasted years can be training years, even when they feel empty, painful, or directionless at the time. This idea challenges the natural human desire for visible progress and quick results. We often assume that if nothing is growing outwardly, nothing valuable is happening inwardly. But God's work is rarely limited to what can be seen. Some of the most important development in a person's life happens in hidden seasons where there is no applause, no recognition, and no obvious reward. Training is rarely comfortable. It stretches disciplines and reshapes a person from the inside out. In the same way, seasons that feel wasted are often the very environments where God builds endurance, humility, patience, and discernment. These qualities cannot be rushed or learned through success alone. They are forged in waiting, disappointment, and perseverance. What feels like stagnation may actually be preparation for responsibility you are not yet ready to carry. Many people look back at quiet or difficult years and label them as unproductive because they did not achieve visible milestones. But growth does not always come with achievement. Sometimes growth comes through survival. You learn how to endure. You learn how to pray when answers did not come. You learn how to keep going even when motivation, disappeared. These lessons are not small. They are foundational. God often trains people in obscurity because public success without private strength leads to collapse. In training seasons, God often removes distractions. He strips away false identities, unhealthy relationships, and misplaced ambitions. This can feel like loss, but it is actually refinement. When everything is taken away, what remains is who you truly are. These moments clarify purpose and deepen dependence on God. Without these seasons, success would rest on unstable foundations. Wasted years can also be training years because they teach discernment. Pain sharpens wisdom. Failure reveals what works and what does not. Disappointment forces you to ask deeper questions about your values, motivations, and direction. You begin to see the difference between what looks good and what is good. This discernment becomes invaluable later, protecting you from repeating the same mistakes and helping you guide others with insight rather than theory. Training seasons often feel slow because God is building roots before fruit. A tree that grows too quickly without strong roots cannot withstand storms. In the same way, rapid success without depth often leads to burnout or moral failure. God's timing is intentional. He slows you down not to punish you, but to strengthen you. What you learn in stillness will sustain you in movement. Many people resist training seasons because they feel forgotten. They assume that if God is silent, he is absent. But silence is not neglect. It is often instruction in another form. God teaches through experience as much as through answers. He shapes character through process, not just revelation. When you later step into purpose, you realize how necessary those quiet years were. Training years also develop compassion. When you have suffered, waited, or struggled, you become more understanding toward others. You listen differently. You judge less. You support more genuinely. God uses this compassion to make your life a source of healing. Without training through pain, success can make people distant. With training, success becomes a platform for service. It is important to understand that training years do not mean you failed God. They mean God trusted you enough to shape you. Discipline is not rejection, it is investment. God prepares those he plans to use. What feels like delay is often intentional pacing. You are not being ignored, you are being equipped. When the training season ends, you rarely step into something small. You step into something that requires everything you learn. Suddenly, patience makes sense. Discernment becomes crucial. Humility keeps you grounded. Endurance keeps you steady. You realize that nothing was accidental. Every tear, every lesson, every moment of waiting contributed to who you became. Looking back, you understand that those years were not wasted at all. They were building strength you could not see at the time. They were shaping your character to carry purpose without losing yourself. God never wastes a season. When you trust him through the training, you eventually discover that what felt like delay was actually preparation for something greater than you imagined. Restoration begins with surrender, and this truth confronts the natural human desire to stay in control. When people think about restoration, they often imagine God fixing circumstances while they hold tightly to their pain, pride, habits, or regrets. But restoration is not something God forces upon a resisting heart. It begins when a person opens their hands and allows God access to what they have been protecting, hiding, or clinging to. Surrender is not weakness. It is the doorway through which healing and renewal enter. Many people want God to change their situation without changing them. They want peace without releasing bitterness, freedom without releasing control, and healing without releasing the past. But God restores what is yielded to him. Anything you refuse to place in his hands remains outside the reach of his transforming power. Surrender is not about losing yourself. It is about trusting God enough to let him lead you where you cannot go alone. Letting go is difficult because pain often becomes familiar. People learn to live with hurt, disappointment, and regret until those things feel like part of their identity. Surrender requires honesty, and honesty can be uncomfortable. It forces you to admit that you cannot heal yourself, fix your past, or control outcomes. But this admission is not failure, it is freedom. The moment you stop trying to carry what was never meant for you to carry is the moment God begins his work. Restoration also requires surrendering guilt and shame. Many people continue to punish themselves for mistakes God has already forgiven. They believe holding on to guilt proves remorse or humility. In reality, it keeps them trapped. God does not ask you to suffer for what he has already redeemed. Surrender means accepting his forgiveness fully and choosing to walk forward instead of replaying old failures. You cannot step into restoration while dragging yesterday behind you. Control is another barrier to restoration. People often try to manage how God should restore them, when he should do it, and what it should look like. When things do not happen according to their expectations, frustration grows. Surrender releases this tension. It allows God to restore in ways that are deeper and wiser than anything you could design. Trusting God's process requires patience, but it also produces peace. Surrender does not mean passivity. It does not mean giving up responsibility or effort. It means aligning your will with God's will. It means obeying even when you do not understand. It means choosing faith over fear and obedience over comfort. True surrender is active trust. It is waking up each day and deciding to place your choices, emotions, and future into God's hands. Fear often resists surrender because fear thrives on control. It tells you that if you let go, everything will fall apart. But God does not ask you to surrender to chaos. He asks you to surrender to him. His guidance brings order, not confusion. His authority brings freedom, not bondage. The very thing you are afraid to release may be the thing preventing your healing. Surrender also opens the heart to transformation. God does not only restore circumstances, he restores identity, vision, and purpose. But these deeper restorations require openness. A guarded heart cannot be healed. A closed mind cannot be renewed. Surrender softens what pain hardened and allows God to rebuild from the inside out. Many people wait for restoration to feel ready before surrendering. God asks for the opposite. Surrender first, and restoration follows. Trust before clarity, faith before evidence. This pattern is uncomfortable, but it is consistent with how God works. He honors trust because trust invites relationship, and restoration flows from relationship. When surrender becomes a daily posture rather than a one-time moment, restoration continues to unfold. Each step of obedience brings more freedom. Each act of trust brings deeper healing. Over time, you realize that surrender did not take anything valuable from you. It gave you peace, clarity, and strength you could not create on your own. In the end, restoration does not begin when circumstances change. It begins when the heart opens. When you surrender your pain, your plans, and your past to God, you make room for him to restore what you could. Never fix by yourself. God can accelerate what was delayed, and this truth challenges the belief that slow progress means permanent loss. Many people assume that because something took too long, it will never happen or will never matter. They look at years of effort with little visible result and conclude that time has defeated them. But God does not operate under the same limitations as human effort. He has the ability to compress seasons, multiply impact, and bring sudden movement after long periods of stillness. Delay often feels like denial, especially when expectations remain unmet for a long time. People grow tired, discouraged, and tempted to settle for less than what God intended. But delay is not proof that God has forgotten you. It is often evidence that he is working in ways you cannot see. God uses delay to develop maturity, patience, and trust. When acceleration comes, these qualities keep you grounded and prepared rather than overwhelmed. Acceleration does not mean God ignores process. It means he redeems it. Everything learned in slow seasons becomes fuel for rapid progress later. Skills sharpened in obscurity, faith strengthened in waiting, and character refined through difficulty suddenly align with opportunity. What once felt like wasted effort becomes essential preparation. When God accelerates, it is not random. It is purposeful and precise. Many people fear acceleration because they feel unready. They question whether they deserve sudden breakthroughs after years of struggle or failure. But God's acceleration is rooted in grace, not merit. It is not a reward for perfection, but a response to surrender and obedience. God often moves quickly once the heart is aligned, because alignment removes resistance. When trust replaces control, doors open that were previously closed. Acceleration can also look different than expected. It is not always in instant success or dramatic change. Sometimes it is clarity after confusion, peace after anxiety, or direction after wandering. These shifts may not be visible to others, but they are powerful. Internal acceleration often precedes external change. God moves within before he moves around you. When God accelerates, he often brings opportunities that seem disproportionate to the season you were in. This can feel intimidating. You may wonder how things change so quickly. But acceleration does not erase the past, it builds on it. Every delay contributed something necessary. The waiting taught discipline. The struggle taught dependence. The silence taught listening. All of it prepared you to handle the speed of what comes next. It is important to understand that acceleration does not mean life will become effortless. It means momentum replaces stagnation. You still need wisdom, humility, and discernment to steward what God brings. Without these, acceleration can become overwhelming. God accelerates responsibly. He gives increase when he knows you can manage it without losing yourself. Another aspect of acceleration is favor. God can place you in the right place at the right time, connecting you with people and opportunities that fast-track progress. This is not manipulation or luck. It is divine alignment. Favor does not eliminate work, but it multiplies its effect. One connection, one decision, or one moment can change the direction of your life because God orchestrated it. Acceleration also reminds you that your timeline is not the final authority. God's timing overrides human expectations. What you thought would take years can happen in months. What you assume was lost can reappear transformed. This realization rebuilds faith. You stop measuring progress by past delays and start trusting God's ability to move suddenly. However, acceleration requires readiness. God does not accelerate people who refuse to learn from delay. If bitterness, impatience, or pride take root, speed would only magnify those issues. But when the heart is teachable and surrendered, acceleration becomes a blessing rather than a burden. God is intentional about when he speeds things up. When you experience acceleration, you begin to see your past differently. You realize that nothing was truly wasted. Every slow step was building toward this moment. You understand that God's timing was not late, it was exact. And this understanding creates gratitude instead of regret. Ultimately, God's ability to accelerate what was delayed proves that time does not have the final word. Faith does. Obedience does. Trust does. When God decides to move, no delay can stop him, and no lost season can prevent his purpose from unfolding in your life. Healing starts in the heart and mind, and this truth reveals why many people remain stuck even after their circumstances change. External improvements can happen without internal transformation, but they rarely last. A new opportunity, a restored relationship, or a fresh start cannot bring peace if the heart remains wounded and the mind remains captive to old patterns. God understands this, which is why his restoration work always begins from the inside out. The heart carries emotional memory. It stores joy, pain, fear, disappointment, and hope. When the heart is wounded, it influences every decision, reaction, and relationship. People may move forward physically while remaining emotionally tied to past hurts. They become guarded, suspicious, or withdrawn without fully realizing why. God does not ignore these internal wounds. He addresses them because he knows that unhealed hearts sabotage restored lives. The mind, on the other hand, shapes interpretation. It decides how you see yourself, others, and God. A wounded mind often tells false stories. It says you are unworthy, incapable, or destined to fail. It replays past mistakes and magnifies fear. Even when God opens new doors, a damaged mindset can keep you from walking through them. This is why God focuses on renewing the mind before changing circumstances. A transformed mind creates space for lasting change. Healing the heart requires honesty. Many people suppress pain rather than process it. They stay busy, distracted, or emotionally numb to avoid confronting wounds. But what is buried alive does not disappear. It influences behavior from beneath the surface. God invites people to bring their pain into his presence, not to judge them, but to heal them. He meets them where they are, acknowledging what hurt them instead of minimizing it. Healing the mind requires replacing lies with truth. Painful experiences often distort identity. People begin to define themselves by what happened to them or what they did wrong. God restores identity by reminding people who they are in him. This renewal is not instant. It is a daily process of choosing truth over familiar negative thoughts. Over time, the mind learns new patterns and faith becomes stronger than fear. Internal healing also affects relationships. Unhealed hearts often project pain onto others. Past betrayals create walls. Past rejection creates people-pleasing or withdrawal. When God heals the heart, relationships become healthier. Trust becomes possible again. Love becomes less fearful. Boundaries become wiser. Restoration in relationships begins with restoration within. Another reason internal healing matters is because purpose flows through the heart and mind. God's calling requires clarity, courage, and confidence. These qualities cannot exist where shame and self-doubt dominate. Healing removes the internal barriers that block obedience. When the heart is healed, you respond then react. When the mind is renewed, you step forward rather than shrink back. God often allows delays not to punish people, but to heal them internally. If external success came before internal healing, it would only magnify broken patterns. Pain does not disappear under pressure. It intensifies. God's patience is protection. He heals first so that blessing does not become burden. Healing the heart and mind also restores joy. Joy is not dependent on circumstances. It flows from inner wholeness. Many people achieve goals yet remain empty because their inner world was never healed. God's restoration brings joy that is stable, not fragile. It remains even when life is uncertain. This healing process requires participation. God heals, but people must be willing to confront truth, forgive, and release control. Healing does not erase memory. It changes how memory affects you. The past loses its power to dictate the present. You remember without reliving. You reflect without being trapped. As the heart and mind heal, identity becomes secure. You stop defining yourself by seasons of loss and start seeing yourself as someone in process with God. Confidence grows quietly. Faith becomes practical. You trust God not just for outcomes, but for daily strength. When healing starts in the heart and mind, restoration becomes sustainable. Life may still have challenges, but you face them from a place of wholeness rather than fear. God's goal is not just to give you a better life externally, but to give you a healthier life internally. And when the inside is restored, the outside naturally begins to align. Comparison delays restoration because it quietly shifts your focus away from God's work in your life and places it on someone else's journey. At first, comparison seems harmless, even motivating. You notice where others are and measure where you should be. But over time, it breeds dissatisfaction, insecurity, and impatience. It causes you to judge your progress not by faithfulness, but by how quickly or visibly others appear to succeed. This mindset disrupts restoration because it pulls your heart out of alignment with God's unique plan for you. Every life unfolds on a different timeline. God designs each journey with intention, taking into account personality, calling, experiences, and capacity. When you compare, you ignore this design and impose someone else's schedule onto your own life. This creates pressure to perform, rush, or settle. Instead of trusting God's timing, you begin to doubt it. Doubt then turns into frustration, and frustration can lead to disobedience. Comparison does not just steal joy, it weakens faith. Comparison also distorts identity. When you constantly measure yourself against others, you begin to define your worth by position, achievement, or recognition. If someone else advances, you feel left behind. If someone else receives praise, you feel overlooked. Over time, this erodes confidence and blinds you to your own growth. Restoration requires a clear sense of identity, and comparison clouds the clarity. Another danger of comparison is that it is based on incomplete information. You see highlights, not struggles. You see outcomes, not processes. You see success, not the cost. This leads to false conclusions. You assume others have easier lives, stronger faith, or greater favor. In reality, everyone carries hidden battles. God may be protecting you from things you are not meant to handle yet. What looks like delay could actually be mercy. Comparison also breeds impatience. When you see others moving ahead, you feel the urge to catch up. This often leads to poor decisions and shortcuts. People compromise values, rush relationships, or abandon seasons of preparation because they are tired of waiting. God's timing is not random. Each season builds something necessary. Skipping steps weakens foundations. Restoration requires patience, not competition. Another effect of comparison is resentment. Instead of celebrating others, you quietly envy them. This poisons the heart and makes gratitude difficult. A resentful heart cannot receive restoration fully because it is focused on what it lacks rather than what God is doing. Gratitude, on the other hand, creates awareness. It allows you to recognize progress even if it is small. God often works through small beginnings, and comparison causes you to overlook them. Comparison also distracts you from obedience. You begin to question whether what God asked you to do matters because it does not look as impressive as what others are doing. You underestimate the value of faithfulness in small things. But God measures success differently. He looks at obedience, not visibility. He rewards faithfulness, not popularity. When you stay focused on your assignment, restoration unfolds naturally. Letting go of comparison requires humility. It means accepting that your journey will not look like anyone else's. It means trusting that God knows what he is doing with your life. This trust frees you from pressure. You stop chasing what is not meant for you and start nurturing what is. Peace replaces anxiety. Purpose replaces frustration. When comparison loses its power, restoration accelerates. You become content with progress instead of perfection. You recognize God's hand in your life instead of questioning his fairness. You learn to celebrate others without diminishing yourself. This emotional freedom creates space for growth. Ultimately, comparison delays restoration because it pulls your attention away from God's voice. Restoration happens when you listen, obey, and trust, not when you compete. God did not call you to be a copy. He called you to be faithful. When you embrace your unique path, you discover that restoration arrives right on time, according to God's perfect plan, not human comparison. Closed doors often protect your future, even though they feel painful and confusing in the moment. When something ends unexpectedly, a relationship, an opportunity, a season, you naturally interpret it as loss or failure. You replay what went wrong and wonder what you could have done differently. But God sees what you cannot see. He sees where certain paths would have led, what they would have required, and how they would have shaped you. Many doors closed not because you were unworthy, but because continuing through them would have cost you more than you realize. Loss hurts because it interrupts expectations. You had plans, hopes, and emotional investment attached to what closed. When those things disappear, it feels like something was taken from you. But protection often feels like pain at first. God's guidance is not always gentle. Sometimes it is decisive. He closes doors firmly because hesitation would keep you stuck in places that no longer align with his purpose for you. Closed doors also expose attachments. When something ends, you discover how much of your identity or security was tied to it. This revelation can be uncomfortable, but it is necessary. God often removes what we rely on too heavily so that we can learn to rely on him more fully. What feels like rejection becomes redirection. What feels like loss becomes freedom. Many people assume that closed doors mean they failed God or that God abandoned them. In reality, closed doors often mean God is intervening. He sees dangers you cannot detect, relationships that would drain you, opportunities that would distract you, or environments that would slowly erode your faith. His love is protective, not permissive. He is more interested in who you become than in what you achieve. Another reason closed doors protect your future is because they make room for growth. Comfort can prevent development. Familiar environments can limit vision. When God closes a door, he disrupts comfort to expand capacity. This expansion prepares you for greater responsibility and deeper purpose. Staying where you are comfortable may feel safe, but it can also keep you small. Closed doors also prevent premature exposure. Some opportunities look appealing, but require maturity you have not yet developed. Entering them too early could lead to burnout, compromise, or discouragement. God times access carefully. He closes doors temporarily or permanently, depending on what best serves your future. Delay is not denial, it is discernment. There is also a spiritual dimension to closed doors. God uses them to refine trust. When something ends without explanation, you are forced to choose whether to trust God's character without clarity. This trust strengthens faith. It teaches you to walk by belief rather than by understanding. Over time, this faith becomes a stabilizing force in your life. Closed doors also redirect focus. When one path ends, you become more attentive to alternatives you previously ignored. God often uses closure to awaken new vision. What you once dismissed becomes meaningful. What you never considered becomes aligned. The end of one season reveals the beginning of another. It is important to resist the temptation to reopen doors God has closed. Nostalgia can be deceptive. You may remember the comfort, but forget the cost. You may miss the familiarity, but overlook the limitation. Re-entering closed seasons can delay growth and restoration. Trusting God means believing that what he closed no longer serves you, even if you do not fully understand why. With time, perspective changes. What once felt devastating becomes understandable. You begin to see how staying would have restricted you. You recognize how closure created space for healing, clarity, and renewal. Gratitude replaces grief as you realize that God was not taking something from you. He was protecting something for you. Closed doors do not end your story. They shape it. They guide you toward freedom rather than confinement. They protect your heart, your purpose, and your future. When you trust God with closed doors, you discover that his redirection is always guided by love, wisdom, and a vision far greater than your own. Restoration creates a greater legacy, and this truth reveals that God's work in your life is never meant to stop with you. When God restores, he is not only healing your past or improving your present, he is shaping something that will impact others long after the pain is past. Legacy is not built through perfection or uninterrupted success. It is built through redemption, through lives that have been broken, healed, and transformed by grace. Many people think legacy is about achievement, status, or recognition, but God defines legacy differently. In his view, legacy is the influence your life has on others, the hope your story gives, and the faith your journey awakens. Restoration turns personal pain into public purpose. What once felt like a private struggle becomes a source of strength for others who are walking a similar path. When God restores wasted years, he gives them meaning. Those years are no longer defined by loss, but by what they produce. The wisdom gained through failure, the compassion developed through suffering, and the resilience formed through endurance become tools God uses to bless others. Your restored life becomes evidence that no season is beyond redemption. People may forget your success, but they will are. Remember how your story gave them hope. Legacy also grows through authenticity. Restored lives carry humility. They do not pretend to have always been strong or faithful. They acknowledge weakness and point to God's faithfulness instead of personal achievement. This honesty creates connection. People trust restored lives because they are real. They show that transformation is possible, not theoretical. God often uses restored people to reach others who feel disqualified or forgotten. Your story resonates with those who share similar wounds. You speak with authority, not because you read about struggle, but because you live through it. This shared experience creates impact that cannot be manufactured. Restoration positions you to serve in ways untouched lives cannot. A restored legacy also reshapes how you view responsibility. You begin to see your life as something entrusted to you, not something you own. Your choices matter because they influence others. You become intentional with your words, actions, and relationships. Restoration awakens a sense of stewardship. You understand that what God healed in you is meant to bring healing to others. Legacy is not always loud or visible. Sometimes it is quiet and consistent. It is seen in how you love, forgive, and persevere. It is built in daily faithfulness rather than public recognition. God values this kind of legacy deeply. Restoration aligns your heart with what truly matters, shifting focus from personal success to lasting impact. Another powerful aspect of restored legacy is generational influence. When God restores you, the effects extend beyond your lifetime. The patterns you break, the faith you model, and the values you live out influence future generations. Restoration interrupts cycles of fear, dysfunction, and hopelessness. It creates a new direction for those who come after you. Restoration also changes how you respond to pain. Instead of becoming bitter, you become purposeful. Instead of closing off, you open up. This response becomes part of your legacy. People learn from how you handled adversity. Your resilience becomes a lesson. Your faith becomes a guide. It is important to understand that legacy is not built overnight. It unfolds as you continue to walk faithfully after restoration. There will still be challenges, but you face them differently. You carry perspective, you carry hope. You carry a sense of calling that is rooted in gratitude rather than striving. In the end, restoration, creating a greater legacy, means that nothing in your life is wasted. Even the hardest seasons become part of a larger story God is writing. Your life becomes a living testimony that God restores, redeems, and repurposes. And long after the pain is gone, the impact of your restored life continues, touching hearts, shaping faith, and pointing others toward the same grace that changed you.